Welcome to What Drives You, where we explore the expanse of our human potential and the miracle of just being alive. I'm your honored guide, Kevin Miller. This episode, the myth of superpowered motives from your wounds and how to fuel your drive at a higher frequency. So I'm unveiling here a very common motivator for your drive that I don't feel like I've adequately conceptualized before this episode. I mean, we all realize that negative feelings can often be a powerful motivator for us. I mean, the desire to prove ourselves to the world. But my guest here really took it a step further, and it was an aha moment for me. Self-development leader Joel Brown. He cited that even among the top performers that he's hired to coach, he finds that many not only have negative motivators driving them, but they're actually afraid to lose them as they feel, even subconsciously, that it's their superpower. Again, it was kind of a boom for me. I think it's just huge that we may be holding on to negative motivators because we've attached our identity and even our power to them. Joel Brown, he is a renowned self-development leader who has inspired 372 million people worldwide with his number one personal development website. You're probably aware of it, Addicted to Success. It's the number 2, Addicted to Success. Over the last 14 years, he's directly impacted over 12,500 lives through hands-on training as well, conferences, retreats, and such. Joel hosts the highly successful Addicted to Success podcast. They've had over 6.2 million plays and downloads after just the past 4 years, and over 9 million plays on his YouTube channel as well, where he's had people like Tony Robbins, Matthew McConaughey, Simon Sinek, Les Brown, and most of the big names. Joel just stands apart to me because of his holistic blend of cutting edge psychological strategies and deep spiritual insights. You'll hear us get into that a bit too. And he delves beyond the surface to target these subconscious patterns that we have that often derail us from our paths, like, being motivated by a negative motivator that we really are holding on to, that we think, again, is our superpower. He is also, Joel, a Jedi of understanding procrastination. That's almost the primary focus of his these days, but I just got so enamored with this other subject we got on, I went down that road. But we do also talk about the 6 procrastination types, and you can find out yours. It's free. It's a quick quiz by going to D as in dog, O as in orange, doquiz.com. So go to doquiz.com and you can take a quick quiz to see your procrastination type. And of course, the point is figuring it out so you can mitigate your natural procrastination propensities. And I talk about mine. I went and took the quiz, obviously. You'll hear, again, us talking about that more. And I would really encourage you right now, wherever you're at, check out his podcast, Addicted to Success. Again, it's the number 2, Addicted to Success. And as you hear us talk and get into these, if you want to discuss them more, if you've got a question, a concern, let me know. I'd love to get your email, kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Folks, what drives you becomes your reality. So we're working on creating a better reality right here, right now. So drive with myself and Joel Brown a moment to consider how you may be subconsciously holding on to a negative motivator and even afraid to let it go. But when you do, you are going to be driven by a much higher frequency. You're about to hear about it. Joel, I have had such a good time with Thais Gibson since I had her on the show, and she is effusively connecting me with the most incredible people. She connected us. I am so grateful and just honored to have you here and eager to dig into the topics that she said, oh my gosh, Kevin, you got to talk to Joel about transformation. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to jump in and share my wisdom with your audience. So thanks for having me.
Well, I want the wisdom right here for me first, man, and then we'll share it with the audience too. I read on your site, and it just kind of struck me, and this is where I'm going to start off. This is literally right off your website. Rooted in elite training methodologies, Joel's coaching tools and frameworks are derived from systems initially developed for the military and intelligence sectors, renowned for their rigor, precision, and effectiveness in high stakes environments. Okay, that's what hit me. We recently had Rich Diviney on the show, ex-Navy
Yeah.
SEAL. He was a leader and trainer of Navy SEALs. And of course, he has been involved in so many high stakes environments from a life or death situation. And yet when I read that, I thought, well, probably everybody listening to this, including me, feels like their life is a high stake environment. It may not be life or death from a physical standpoint, but from a mental, a relational, emotional statement or aspect, it feels like high stakes for all of us, doesn't it?
Mm. Absolutely, yeah. There's no doubt we live in a world where we're bombarded with information. You just look at the news headlines, and as they say, if it bleeds, it leads, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we are constantly fed fear-driven titles, and there's a lot of uncertainty when we read too much into it, right? And I think what can be really exhausting for people, this conversation of burnout is huge right now. What can be
Yeah.
exhausting is when you are trying to control things that are outside of your agency to be able to control it, right? What is stress? Stress is fear of loss of control. That's ultimately what it is. So the first thing I look at is we explore what feelings are coming up for you right now, what emotions are in play, because my job as a coach, as a leader in any environment, whether it's with a team, whether it's with an individual or an executive, is to bring you back into your center. Okay. A lot of the time we don't, people are so disconnected from who they are and where their center is that they are bouncing around like a pinball in a pinball machine. And it's because a lot of the subconscious is running the show and they haven't trained their subconscious. You know, we should be training our brains like we are an athlete, like a neuro athlete, right? Just training it to be prepared for a structured day, a day of creation, a day of intention. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a high achiever running up a hill every day of your life, but we all face things that are at times out of our control. And so it's really important to be aware of what's important for us to sit down and want to control it if it's something that we feel could actually be beneficial for our life, or knowing when to surrender and let that go. A lot of time people are trying to control what they must surrender in, and they're not actually getting into action on the things they could control.
Dude, surrenders has not been a part of my life. That word. I mean, that's like a weak. It's right. It's a weak word in our culture,
Yeah.
and especially amongst men and whatnot. And I'm just now learning more about that. But I want to go. You mentioned training our brains like athletes, and I'm so interested in where we miss it, where we miss things. I keep coming back to that, where we think we get it, but we miss it. And so you come back to that, training our brains like athletes. I would have said, man, I'm a rock star. I was a pro cyclist. Man, I know how to get on there, give it all you've got, and do whatever it takes, and charge for the podium and whatnot. But it was training my brain for performance, and go
Yeah.
back to what you said a minute ago, being in touch with our feelings and our emotions. The point that I had back then was there was no place for those. They weren't even on the radar for me. You just get up and you do it. Now, if I had been in tune with them, I probably would have been a far better cyclist or far better athlete in person in general, but I wasn't. And that's one where, looking at performance, I can even look at, all the stuff you've done and look at your websites, and it can feel performance based. But then when I start reading it, you're talking about personal transformation. You're talking about rewiring the brain. And that gets us into feelings and emotions, which we can all give head nod, give a nod to. But man, we have no training for
Mm.
that. We have no training
Yeah.
in normal life unless we have, we grew up in a monastery or something. And I want to address that it's so foreign for most of us, even high performers.
Yeah, look, you could be in a monastery and be in full avoidance of other things in life too. You
True.
know, so it's
True.
really a dance. It's really a dance of getting clear. What do I value? Why is this important to me? And then, just like an athlete would train, you said that you were a pro cyclist, right? So you had to have structure. There was no way you were going to get to the pinnacle of your career in that field without being structured, without being disciplined and knowing what to focus on. If you were easily distracted and or you ran away when things were hard, you
Yeah.
wouldn't have achieved what you achieved. And you know, sometimes I have this thought where I'm like, hey, would I have achieved as much success if I didn't have trauma? If I didn't have my wounds? You know, because sometimes we have that something to prove, and something to prove when it comes to challenging our own self and seeing what we can achieve within our own potential can be very powerful. But if we're trying to prove from a place of uh, getting acceptance from the external validation and approval from others because
Yeah.
we don't feel good enough within, then that chase is just never ending, you know? So I check in on this a lot within myself, but also with my clients. We're looking at, okay, why are you doing what you do? That's the most important thing. Why are you doing what you do? If we can work that out, then we can work out if your game plan for approaching life, business, relationships, whatever it may be, is it this going to be the most productive path that you can take? And part of being a productive game plan also means that you have time to oscillate and have that time where you go and unplug, where you have time to sit and just creatively think, just allow yourself to think and observe. I had a conversation with Dr. Joe Dispenza many years ago, and he said something that really sent chills down my spine because it was so apparent in my life at the time that I got to pay attention to it. He said, maybe we're just poor observers. And that can be true. If we're not observing our situation, we can continue, man, for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year in the same patterns and wonder why we're not getting the results that we want in our life.
Well, that would be one. I mean, I like to think of myself as, Jason Bourne, and I'm aware of all the circumstance, all the external, I'm aware of what's going on over there. I'm socially aware even of the people around me and the things around me. And yet and I'm so observing, I said again, man, I'm top notch. And then you would ask about me internally. I, no, no vision for that. No, I'm not observing that. And let's go to, you said trauma. It was one of the questions I was going to ask, Joel. I know so much about what you have done. It's why you're sitting here and how you've helped people. And yet I don't know your backstory that well. And when you talk about trauma, that's what I want. That's what we're always interested in. Okay. So you're here helping people, guiding people, leading people. What's the story though? I've never had anyone on the show yet who just said, you know what, man, I just came out of the womb wise. I just knew it. I had it.
Of
And
course.
I've been teaching people ever since. They all came from, holy crap, this is what happened to me. And I worked my way out of it. And now I want to help other people.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Well, yeah, it's a good question, and we can unpack it, and I'll do my best along the way to tie some principles to each, part of the story.
please.
You had Tace Gibson on your podcast on one of the episodes. She's an incredible friend of mine and business partner. She's awesome. And I actually went to Tace at one point in my life because I was struggling in relationship. I continued to attract women that were dismissive, avoidant. I had anxious attachment style that was very strong within me at that time when this is probably about 6, 7 years ago. And I got to a point where I was like, I'm this guy that is speaking on stages with some of the biggest thought leaders in the world. I've interviewed the biggest icons. I have coached over 12,000 people, but I felt like a fraud because I always gave away so much in relationship. I felt
Mm.
not good enough. And so I would continue to just buy all these things and pay for expensive trips and overindulge and give away so much. And it's because I was coming from a place of not feeling that I was enough in relationship. And so I got to actually sit down and have a forgiveness conversation with my mother and my father. What I realized in the process after Tace had asked me, if your father was to die today, would you feel complete in your relationship with him? I felt this tension come up the sides of my face, up to my head, and I felt a tear run down my cheek. And I didn't realize on a subconscious level, because the body never lies, right? It keeps score. It showed me that there was something there, this yearning to have an open connection with my father. And I brought it up to him, and it was a very healing conversation. Initially, he was sort of apprehensive. Oh, I think you're overanalyzing things. And I've always been this masculine figure and go, go, go. Don't open up too much about your feelings. And so was he. That's where I learned a lot of it from. But he admitted that when I was born, my mom had postnatal depression and she was hugging on to me And I was learning this anxious energy, and I was learning that that equals love. So I would feel that in relationship when I was giving away so much, and when the person I was with was pulling away. And so I felt like that was just normal. That's how you relate in relationship.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I realized I was trying to complete a loop on a subconscious level by attracting women that behave the way my father did, which is crazy because I'm a heterosexual man. I'm married. I got a wife right now. And so what we do is we see people, places, things as avatars, as representatives of things that we associate to. We do it with money, we do it with God, we do it with our partners, we do it with ourselves, we do it with musicians, pop stars, coaches, all sorts of figures. We do this all the time. And so I realized that once I healed my relationship with my father and say, I forgive you for not being there when I was younger and leaving the house, and me not feeling that I could say I love you or even having that connection with you, I forgive you for that. He then shared with me that his father never even said I love you or gave him a hug until he was on his deathbed. So
Wow.
I realized, oh my God, my father came such a long way from where he was. And it was such a healing thing for our family dynamic. My father, who was very closed off to personal development, ended up going in and telling my mom, we're going to fly out to Bali and go to one of Joel's events. You know, we had 100 people or so coming to Bali for our event. And he got up on stage. He had breakthroughs. You know, he teared up. It was so
Wow.
powerful, man. It had a ripple effect in our family and with their friendships as well. So, yeah, it's needed, you know. And I walked around with this mask of they call it mask of masculinity, is trying to be so tough and the I'm stoic and I need to prove myself. I had this Superman complex of having to carry the weight of everyone around me and prove myself all the time. And I would say that a big part of that was how I was when I was younger, but also, I was bullied throughout high school because I used to stand up to the bullies. I used to learn martial arts. So I hated injustice and I stood up
Yeah.
to them. And in turn, I got really beat up one day in front of a lot of people. And I really took that on board of, I'm not going to be the victim. I'm going to be the victor. But it was very much overcompensationary success. It was like, I'm going to prove to you, I'm going to show you, which was, a pretty powerful driver, but it led me to a lot of adrenal fatigue, a lot of burnout, because I
Yeah.
constantly was trying to prove instead of coming from more of a centered place and healed place and approaching it at a pace that was more natural. And that's why now I get to support so many people because I've navigated those emotional paths. I've navigated aspects of that trauma and that wounding. I know what it feels like, so I can really empathize with people that have a chip on their shoulder that feel like they have to prove themselves. And so what we do is we really sit down and go through the layers of the childhood wounds and the childhood blueprint to smooth over the stories so they're not so intense and aggressive, and so we can actually come from a place that's filled with more wisdom and intention, so you become productive but you also don't burn out in the process.
Man, thank you. I got a handful of things to ask more about that. One, I mean, we're speaking this podcast is going to go out to tens of thousands of what I call aspiring people, right? That's who listens to your shows. That's who comes to
Yeah.
your website. I mean, if they're not, they're off listening to some crime drama and they're not listening to this show. So by proxy, I'm going to put them in that aspiring, let's say even high achieving
Yep.
demographic. That's who we're talking to. So, and that's who your clients are. So amongst those, when you say, I had these, let's call them wounds. I had these issues and
Yep.
I went forward. You said overcompensating for them, overcompensating success instead of from a centered place. I'm going to ask you because I'm betting the percentage is pretty high. So again,
Yeah.
talking to the audience, everybody who's listening right now,
Yeah.
aspiring people, high achievers, whatever, how many of them initially at least tend to go forward achieving from a place of trying to compensate for a wound? You said a chip on the shoulder, something of that nature. And we're trying to prove ultimately to ourselves, to others maybe, but mostly even to ourselves. Thus, it gets us into the imposter syndrome. And I would say ultimately burnout. Play with that with
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I, I think that for a long time, I personally, and also I noticed this in my coaching clients as well, is we have this hallucination, this BS story that if I heal my wound, I'm going to lose my power. Right? It's there. It's like
Interesting.
this subtle thing. I don't know if you've ever felt that, but like, oh, if I get too
No,
healed and I get
no, man.
too,
I feel like that's a mic drop, though. Honestly, I'm interrupting you, but say it again. A hallucination that.
yeah,
Say it again. Say it
yeah,
again.
that's a hallucination, which is a limiting belief, a BS story that you've told yourself that, yeah, but if I heal that wound of not feeling good enough, then I'm going to lose my energy, my motivation, my drive to be able to succeed. And
Never
I
thought of
believed
it
that
that
for a
way.
long time. Yeah, and I felt like it was like this charge that was coming from behind me, but the truth was it was a lot of pain. Who wants to achieve success when you've constantly got your back against the wall? It's like you're waiting for the adrenaline rush to have to kick in order for you to feel motivated.
Yeah.
Why not heal that so that you can actually make a decision that you could be motivated at any point in time, not that you have to wait for it like to feel like the world is caving in for you to move. And that's what I find with a lot of high achievers that I work with. And I empathize so much because I have been that, and I've been able to come into more of a secure attached in my relationships and how I relate to people, but also in my procrastination patterns. We're going to probably go into the conversation of procrastination, Kevin, but like I ask a lot of high achievers, do you procrastinate? And so often they say, no, 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 I don't procrastinate. I say to them, don't mistake movement for progress,
Yeah.
right? Denzel Washington said, don't mistake movement for progress. And I say that too, because often we think just because we're running hard 24/7 that we're actually progressing to where we want to be. But often it's coming from a place of shame, guilt, fear. You're having to constantly tap into courage to try and run the mountain. And that gets so exhausting. Your body's taking the hit, right? Our unconscious is the body is the unconscious. So we're constantly coming from a limitation, trying to run away from it rather than sitting in it, identifying that it's there, accepting that it's there, and moving through processes to let it go so it no longer has power over you. You have power over it. And you get to choose at any point in time when you activate into that frequency to be able to move forward with focus, with no distraction, with no overcompensation, but just directed laser like focus. And you can unplug and not feel consumed by it and spend time with your family and your loved ones and rest and do what you get to do and then come back into the pocket and go for it again. It's totally possible. And I didn't think it was for a long time until I healed those wounds and realized, wait, it just means that I get to take a different approach. I just get to be structured and not have to rely on the adrenaline rush to push me, but
Man,
inspiration.
I've been in this arena for so long, Joel, and it just blows me away. I need to quit being surprised by it that every week I hear something that blows my mind. All right. So honestly, you just did. I'm sitting here enamored with what you just said. Because how many of us, I want everybody to listen, including myself, how many of us subconsciously, I would say, have what you just said, a little bit of fear of, dude, if I lose my whatever, my fear,
Edge.
my
Yeah.
anger,
Yeah.
my bitterness, I lose my power. Okay, so here's the mental imagery that just went through my head. So I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. It's one of my favorite movies and depictions of
Yeah.
so many things. And the last scene of the last movie where Aragorn is crowned king, just brings me to tears. But I've also looked at it, and I'm thinking about it now that you said that, and I'm thinking, he says now it's a time of peace. I think, okay, what are they going to do? So here's these badasses, Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas. And so now what? They're going to prop their feet up, put on some bathrobes and drink old fashions. And do I look at that? Do we tend to look at that and go, man, without the battle? But what you're talking about, okay, I'm thinking out loud. I mean, the battle's still there. I mean, there's still people to help. There's ourselves to help. There's people to help. And you're saying we just got to change the motive. What drives you? That's my book and my podcast.
Yeah.
Change the drive from the wound to a place of centeredness. I want to help people from this power instead of this negative power. Fair enough?
Yeah. Here's the thing, right? When you're creating from a place or attempting to create from a place that is in a lower frequency, where you're coming from shame, guilt, fear, something to prove, blame, even apathy. It's tough. It's pulling the boulder up the hill. You know, a lot of people, what they do, especially in personal development. You know, I've been in this game for 20 some years. I've been coaching for 15 years now, and what they do is they want to continue to add things on top. It's like, what's the next strategy? What's the next thing? But the question is, what if it's not about adding more, but actually letting go of what's back here, that boulder that you're holding on to? Because if we can release that, the load becomes lighter. You can actually move faster. You can move more powerful, and you can even have time for breaks because you're no longer carrying a heavier load. You know, like imagine trying to walk up a mountain with 50 pounds of extra weight in your backpack. If you could take that off and walk the mountain, you'd realize, oh my gosh, I'm actually enjoying the view while I'm up here instead of puffing and panting, you know, exhausted. And that's what a lot of people do when they are coming from lack and scarcity, always something to prove. So their mind is consumed with proving, proving, proving. I need validation. I need likes on my posts. I need pats on the back. I need the next award. It's never enough. Like even you hearing me say this feels
Mm-hmm.
exhausting in your own mind. It's like, oh my gosh, I would hate that life. But so many of us live it. You know, I sometimes feel myself go through the little fluctuation of my natural tendencies because it has been practiced so long in my subconscious, sort of magnetically being pulled back into it a bit. And then I've got to be aware of it and come back away from it and make decisions from a place that's grounded, that's centered, that's from acceptance, understanding, love, joy, peace, creation, not stagnation and destruction. Because you can be on the big stages all around the world. You can publish the best-selling books. You can be on the top podcasts. But if you go to home at night and you cry yourself to sleep because you feel nothingness, you feel empty, was it worth it?
Okay, let me unpack a couple things there. One is the reality that we're not going to arrive in one fell swoop, that this is a constant, peeling back the layers in essence, because, it's interesting. You reminded me, I got hit recently. I mean, Joel, again, I've been in this industry for a long time, almost all my life. I mean, my dad grew up, this was his world and I grew up in it. And yet at 53 years old, where I am now and having the best of the best on the show, not just doing an interview, but studying their work. And it was in the past month that I had two people bring to me around some relational stuff. He said, Kevin, you're full of resistance. Dude, you got to be like water and quit resisting things. It's not working for you. Oh my gosh. It just hit me like this. And that it's a piece that we do have layers to not feel bad. I don't need to beat myself up I'm going to be realizing stuff for the rest of my life. I hope I realize something on my deathbed that I didn't know. But in that, I also want to point out, back to your story, you talked about getting with Thais and working on your attachment style. And you even said, you'd been doing this for a long time. You had coached, 12,000 people. You were on stage with stuff and you had this issue. And I want to bring that forth because that's another issue I see with all of us, kind of talk back to the imposter syndrome, is that we can tend to look at, we're not perfect. We're not going to be. We can still help people along the way. You were helping people then. You're helping people even better now. But as you are a proponent, you coach coaches. It's always felt important to me that they need to understand that they're not coaching from a place of perfection. They still have their own journey.
Yeah.
They're still dealing with those. And you just testified that in your own life.
Yeah. We can bring so much more value to the table when we can support people to navigate to the places that they're most scared of, right? So most people are hiding, avoiding, and pretending not to know that they have challenging things in their mindset, right? Limiting beliefs and BS stories they tell themselves. And so if I was always Mr. Prim and proper and perfect in my walk, it's not relatable,
Yeah.
and people wouldn't believe that I know how to navigate the deepest, darkest things that they struggle with if I was always presenting myself as perfect. And so I find it very important, not just in my own healing process, to share and be vulnerable, but it inspires other people to open up too, because
Yeah.
none of us are perfect. And,
Yeah.
God did a good job at creating an incredible body and mind, and we do a very poor job at navigating life sometimes, you know. So I think just having that grace for ourselves to know, okay, I don't need to be always on. I don't need to always be perfect. I talk with big 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure people, you know, and when I hear the conversations they have with their friends, and when I sit down and have a conversation with them about what they've gone through, they're just like you and me, man.
Yeah.
They're going through very similar thought patterns. They've just been able to build a great network over time. They're being consistent. For some people it's like good timing, right timing. They had some good funding. A lot of people are struggling with a lot of the similar things. It's just expanded on a higher level for people with more money and more, you know, status. So yeah, I just like sitting down and getting real and raw with people. And you know, I've seen people break, man. I've seen people with hundreds of millions of dollars in front of me just break down and cry. They're spiritually bankrupt. You know, they are in fear that their wife's going to leave them. Their kids don't respect them or love them, and they've sacrificed so much. They've just continued to make low quality decisions, so therefore they have a low quality of life. I'm not impressed by someone that has massive success in one dimension. It's not impressive to me. I want to see the guy that was able to work out how to create more harmony in his life, where all as the tide rises, so do the boats in every area. Like his family respects him. He has a great relationship with his partner. He has a spiritual connection with his creator. He has been able to work out the business game. He has money coming in. Doesn't necessarily have to be making, you know, a ton, but he's been smart about how he manages it and has respect for it. To me, that's way more impressive. And I think it's a life where we get to live in the fullness of who God created us to be. We get to come back to that original design of who created us to be, and not be so preoccupied with who the world is trying to make us to be.
Yeah.
You know, in the scriptures it says, "Do not be conformed by the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And I love
Yeah.
that in Romans, because we can be so pulled into the systems, the matrix of the world, if you want to refer to it as that, this construct that we use. Uh, we can be so preoccupied with it. We can be so in fear of it. We can be constantly looking for the boogeyman that's about to come around the corner, instead of being present and saying, "Hey, how can I create at the highest level today? And how can I impact in a positive way?"
Man, I appreciate that sentiment too of these people that my gosh, it's been such a gift to have the people like you on the show, and have had, you know, I've had 250 plus of some of the world's most influential people on the
Awesome.
show. And it's been these long conversations and getting to know them on and off camera. And they're just regular people. I haven't met one that levitates while we're doing the show. You know, that's just, it's
Yeah.
funny. I had Don DePani, you know, on the show. So the dude, you know, he
Yeah.
was a monk for 10 years and now he's in his ashram in Costa Rica, and he's on the show, and he's got, you know, the three stripes across his head, and he's in his robe, and he talks about that. And it was so on the show, you know, he said, man, I look like this. People they'll just agree with any BS I give them. And I loved hearing that from him, you know, and then him talking later and saying, you know, I used to meditate for like 1 hour, 2 hours now. Now I got a kid. And if I get 20 minutes, I'm good. You know, he's a real person, and it helps to see that and to realize that we don't arrive at nirvana before we can help someone else. You just mentioned, well, you quoted scripture and you mentioned the spiritual piece on getting to the real undergirdings that we all deal with. That was one of the things that drew me to you, Joel, was that. And I want to ask you to speak on that. I know it's a part of your platform. It's on, if I go to your, you know, Instagram account, you've got postings there about the spiritual aspect for life. Not a lot of people hit that face on. It was Arthur Brooks recently did. He was on the show and he really hit that specifically. But that piece drew me to you. And how have you, I want to ask, how have you, well, I was going to say, how have you integrated that into your role in leading people, or did you not necessarily? It's just a part of your foundation. You can't not.
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I chased many different concepts of God for a very long time. It's very exhausting, very confusing. I came to understand more of the character of God through reading the scriptures. To actually
Hmm.
just sit down and say, hey, everyone's got an opinion, but I just want to sit down and read it for myself, right? And if this Holy Spirit thing is real, because I've had spiritual experiences, I can't deny that. And if it seems to be a very beneficial thing that you could have in your life, because when I look at the character of Jesus, I'm like, man, if anyone could be even 10% of who Jesus is, that would be epic. You want to talk
Yes.
about, the feminine and the masculine. We use these Western psychological constructs to basically explain behaviors and traits. He was the full integration of both, like just perfect integration. He was so loving, compassionate, present, attentive. And on the other hand, he was so courageous and saw his mission all the way through. He saw beyond the purpose and created a ripple effect. He was this poor carpenter boy that recruited some of the most unlikely people, a tax collector, a fisherman, a prostitute, and walked the earth. And within 3.5 years, completed his mission, died, resurrected, brought the gospel to the world, and over 2 billion people, even to this day, worship him. If you calculated how many have worshiped him over the course of history since he was around over 2,000 years, it would be multi billions, right? And so, people glorify people like Tony Robbins or Dwayne The Rock Johnson or Oprah Winfrey, but you look at Jesus, no one can touch him.
Mm-mm.
So I was like, hey, man, I want to, see what standards he set. Let's live in that. And the more that I read, I realized I can't do it myself. It's learning through him and having that spiritual connection with our creator. I truly believe that we are not dancing with our DNA. We didn't come from a salamander or evolve from a monkey. I truly believe there's intelligent design in the universe. I believe that you and I and anybody listening, you have meaning that's placed on your heart. You're here for a reason. You're part of his story. It's history is his story. It's unfolding, whether we like it or not. It's playing out. And he created us for a reason. And he created beautiful things in this world like marriage and nature and the responsibility that we get to have dominion over the earth. That's a huge responsibility, and I think it gives us purpose. It gives us purpose to expand and to grow our character. And I'm up for it, man. I'm all in. I'm like, hey, I want to go there. That's what I want.
Yeah.
That to me is next level. That goes beyond self actualization. It's living for my creator and a greater mission that goes beyond the finite. It goes into the infinite. God plays the eternal game, not the short game here that so many people play. So yeah, I want to be part of that, man. That's bigger than purpose itself.
Well, again, looking at all you've done, which there's a lot, at the core of it is transformation. You're looking to transform yourself, help other people transform themselves. So, thus my curiosity in the focus on spirituality. We had Dr. Tama Bryant on the show. She is now the president of the American Psychological Association. And she shared on the show, one of her focal points is bringing spirituality into psychology. She says this is like the
Yeah.
bedrock of our humanity. We go back in time. I make a case for this on spirituality in my book, What Drives You, on this is like the dawn of history is based on a spiritual understanding, or at least faith. And she's saying, yeah. And so if we're going to meet people and actually help them understand them and help them transform, we've got to at least acknowledge spirituality in their lives. So here you, again, if I look at face value, a lot of your stuff, I mean, you work with, high profile people. You're on stage with, like you said, Tony Robbins and the best of the best out there. And it can look, again, like a performance based aspect. And yet you're at the core, you're looking for personal transformation. You said that you bring in the next CEO of whatever, and you're bringing them back to going, okay, where are your emotions? Where are your feelings? Are you aware of your inner self? And I think for most people, it's hard to separate that from their spirituality, which on the base, I just say is a belief in something greater. And I'm interested with you. I find that if people don't have that connection, they don't have some kind of a thought towards something greater, it kind of leaves them in no man's land. It's really difficult for them to navigate the depths of themselves. Is that what you've experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all have a spirit. Why would you not want to understand it? People spend a lot of time trying to understand their brain. They spend a lot of time trying to understand their emotions, or they talk about their emotions. We spend a lot of time looking at relationship. Why are we not look at our spirit, right? And you know, sometimes there can be a bit of you hear these words like spiritual bypassing. People can use the spiritual aspect to not face off with the realities of life. It happens in every belief system. You know, when it comes to whether it's religious or new age or whatever the esoteric stuff is. And so I'm very big on making sure we're grounding ourselves in the reality of design. You know, God is very clear on what he created, and there's a law of reciprocity, which is that when it rains, goes to the earth, um, it then precipitates, it comes back up, it rains again, right? And even the trees, you know, in nature, it lets off oxygen, and it absorbs in our carbon. And so there's this cyclic thing that's happening in nature that God has created so it can be self-sustaining. And that's how we get to be as humans too. We're meant to be of service. And if we're not, if we're just serving just for ourselves, we're missing the spiritual aspect, understanding that there's more to us than our business or our company. There's more
Yeah.
to us than the money in our wallet. We're here for something greater, you know? And so I think we're going to spend the rest of our life trying to piece that together. And that's the beauty of it is I think if we were to download all of what God wants us to understand in like one swoop, uh, it would blow our brain apart. We wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to handle it, right? So, yeah, I've had just the drippings of the learnings over the last 8 years of reading scripture, speaking with theologians, speaking with philosophers, studying Christian apologetics, and just understanding that at the end of the day, it's about relationship with God. It's not even about religion. You know, there is a lot of empty religion through
Yeah.
institutions of religion,
Yeah.
which is man-made and can be very controlling. And I think coming back to that relationship with our creator helps us to understand how we can best show up in life, not because we fear God in the sense of, oh, he's going to send a lightning bolt if I do something wrong, but going, I have respect for God. And he put a book on this earth called the Bible. It stands for, this is an acronym, Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth.
Yeah.
Basic instructions before leaving Earth. Why would I not want to read the instruction book to see how I can best tap into? It's the ultimate personal development, man. A lot of personal development is built off the back of the Bible. I don't know if you know
Yeah.
that. When you look at a lot of
Totally.
the teachings, Proverbs is like a book of gold, and so many personal development quotes and sayings have been remixed from that, and a lot of personal development frameworks and tools again goes back to who God originally designed us to be in the frameworks of the world. Why would you not want to understand how to plug into how you're created? To me, that's wisdom. It's not just
Good.
knowledge and information, it's wisdom, which is knowledge and information applied and felt on a cellular and spiritual level.
Right, right there, Joel. Great segue on a cellular level. This is one of the quotes I pulled off from you too. He said it was a testimony. Joel doesn't just aim to change behaviors temporarily. He seeks to transform your very way of being. All right, I want everybody to hold that, to transform our very way of being. Because I am concerned that when we hear a statement like that, it can almost be offensive. Well, you want to transfer the way that I be? I'm me, man. I want to be me. I want to be authentic. That's the word today. I want to be authentic. And what I continue to realize is that we are so often, that's the issue. We are not being ourselves today. We're
Yeah.
not being authentically us. We are being all these constructs out here. So when you say Joel seeks to transform your very way of being, would it be fair to say into more of who you actually are that you're not being currently? Fair?
Yeah, it's coming back to God's original design of who he created you to be. We
Yeah.
let so much of the world in us, like that verse in Romans, do not be conformed to the patterns of the world. Like we're so conformed to it. Like just think about how often you look at your social media and you find yourself in comparison, or
Yeah.
you get down because you're post didn't reach as many people. This is something that comes up a lot now because Instagram or Meta has killed the algorithm reach. It's been insane lately. But that's a thing, it's a concern for humans because we want harmony. I really, I believe that if someone wants a lot of drama in their life, there's some deep seated wounds and trauma that's playing out. It's not really who they were created to be. But for the most part, most people want harmony in their life. They want to feel like, hey, when I get up, things are flowing. My relationship is solid. My kids, if you have kids, they're healthy and happy. Everyone wants that, especially men. They want that for their wife. They can take on some more of that stress and they can handle the harder stuff if they need to. But if their wife is happy and their kids are happy, that's a good inspiration, right? You have 9 kids, brother.
I do.
So you know what it's like to have a big family, right? You took what it says in the scriptures: go forth and multiply and be fruitful. You
Yeah,
took
I
that
fully bought
seriously,
into
bro.
that one. Apparently,
Yeah. but
yeah.
but when you see your kids happy, bro, that reminds you as a reflection that God put you here to not just be of yourself, but to come back to your potential of who you can be. My biggest fear is one day standing before God, our creator, and he says, Joel, I gave you all of this much, with his arms stretched out wide. And he said, but you only did this with
Mm.
the thumb and the second finger just so close together, that tiny little slither. I would hate that. Like, wow, I didn't tap into the as much as I could. No one's going to get all of it, right?
Can
But
we
we just
can we
have the
play right there
capacity.
for a second, Joel?
Yeah.
Because I'm with you. Uh, I'm absolutely with you. I mean, at the end of the day, it's probably what drives me the most is go back to scripture, the multiplying of the talents of going, gosh, I've been given this. What can I do with it? I've been given so much privilege. I've been given this insight. I've been given this trauma that I can help people with. And I want to do that. Now over here, and you've mentioned the word burnout multiple times. I continue to hear testimony of, and I get it. I get it. I empathize with it, but testimony of, oh my gosh, can I just be enough also? And I feel like I'm striving and I'm striving and I'm never enough. And I'm on this personal development wheel and I'm just never enough. There's always, and they can take that and put it on like, kind of like carrying your faith. They can carry that as a burden. Oh my gosh, I'm supposed to multiply my talents. I'm supposed to do more. I'm not doing enough. And yet, okay, so help me balance that tension because you can feel that way. And I understand that feeling. And then over here though, man, it's really the desire to grow and progress that gives me a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Otherwise, what the heck am I doing? So,
Yeah.
but there seems to be no, I know there's a tension in there. I've experienced it, but hit that because as you say that, I say, yeah, I agree with you. And I know that that's a burden to some people to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have a simple prayer. God, empty me of the world and fill me with your spirit, because his spirit knows what I need the most, even more than me. And, I do what I can to search my own needs. But if I ask him to fill me with it, my desires in my heart will start to shift. And that's what happened. When I was at the top of the mountain, I'm talking, documentary films, on stages with some of the biggest names, penthouses that could kiss the sky, luxury cars, all these things at like the height, the pinnacle of my career, I felt empty. But when I started to explore this relationship with God, I realized the desires in my heart started to shift. I started to feel myself being more grounded. It didn't slow me down in what I could achieve. I just realized that the things I was following were temporal, right? And that goes back to the finite game and the infinite game. What I realized is I wanted to make longer term vision moves that had depth and meaning rather than short term quick wins, because that was just a never ending hamster wheel run, right? So, yeah, like so many of us, again, conforming to the world,
Mm-hmm.
we're constantly trying to keep up with the Joneses and we're constantly trying to keep up with what we think it should be. And I'm guilty of that, man. I flux in and out of it. It's never
Yeah.
perfect, right? Because we are still in the world. God says you're of the world, but not in the world. And that's not a fact that's exactly how you are. That's a call for you to rise above it. That's what he's doing there. Is he's saying the standard is if you can come out of having to conform all the time to how the world wants you to be, you're going to start operating from a place that I've created for you, which is the kingdom of God, operating from the kingdom. Jesus talks about the talents. You don't burn out with the talents because now you are being fueled by God to achieve those things, not fueled off your own desperation and lack and scarcity, which is low frequency. I want God's frequency running through me as a vessel. I am no longer a dam that holds it all in to try and scarcely just grab it all. I'm a river that where it flows through me, where His current as a conductor flows through me. And that's what the way I want to, as often as possible, look at different elements of my life is how can I be that with my wife and not
Yeah.
be this person that's sort of like you have to be this way and so rigid, just accepting her for who she is, and even accepting that I'm not perfect in the way that I am. And then looking at money is how can I allow that money to flow through where I become a currency conductor and I conduct and move it to where it gets to be and it's impactful where it goes. And how can I be that in my business where people come in and their lives are transformed and impacted? That's flow, brother. You're not always having to 100% hustle. It's maybe 50% hustle, 50% flow. That's a good ratio right there. Yes, be disciplined and focused, but don't always be pushing the boulder up the hill.
Let me take that. I had this discussion the other day, Joel, with a friend about somewhat about our reach. What is our calling? What is our reach out there? And you just mentioned that you've been on these stages, you're doing documentaries, you got a penthouse in the sky and you got the cars and you got the whatever. It's so difficult in our culture, especially maybe always, to look at if we are doing well, we will achieve those things. We recently had Dr. James Doty on the show in his book Magic Mind, where he talks about the science of manifesting. And he says the first place that we tend to go wrong with this manifesting concept is we think about it as all external. I'm going to manifest the penthouse and the car and the big bank account and all this. And we don't look inside. Who do we want to be? What do we want to, manifest of ourselves? And I brought with my buddy the other day that it kind of the age old kind of came from church background of going, who's at the right hand of God? The pastor with the small church out in the rural area who had 20 people show up, every week, but he took care of them. He fulfilled what he felt God had him to do. And then over here is Billy Graham, who wanted to, bring 1 million people or whatever it was, 10 million people to the Lord. I personally feel like contextually, as I read the Bible, that neither of them is any greater. They were called to what they were called to.
Yeah.
So back here to look at, multiplying our talents and being in tune with God and doing what we're going to do. If I make it about my reach, what I feel called to do. And if I feel okay with, man, I'm taking care of these people right here. I don't care the number, but this is who I feel called to. It's not going to make me rich and famous, maybe, but I'm going to take care of them. And that's what I feel called to do. Man, that's fulfilling, God's purpose or my purpose. No different than if I'm over here. Cause I got to admit, I'm somebody over here and I hear a message like yours and I think, I want more people to hear it. That's just what I feel. That's what excites me. It's what inspires me. I want more people to hear it. Well, they'll hear it if I grow my show. So I'm going to grow my show and I want to reach that. No right or wrong. It's just what happens to be inside of us.
Yeah. Well, I'm praying to be the container that can hold the mission that God has for me, right? I refer to this as the higher calling.
Yeah.
Everyone has the higher calling, but a lot of the time they will go through life and never tap into it because they never open themselves up as a vessel to be built by God through whatever trials, tribulations, sitting down and actually learning the lessons and reintegrating or applying or whatever it may be. And we can read books. I can read hundreds of books, but if I don't implement any of it, then what a waste, right? My container is no stronger.
Yeah.
The information, the liquid in it is in, but it's gone out. And it's like, there might be traces of it left, but the container hasn't gotten stronger. It hasn't expanded. So I would just say, praying to God for more capacity for what he has, ready for us to bestow upon us. I think he truly is waiting for people to open themselves up to be bigger vessels. A lot of the time people they're not ready to be the bigger vessels. They're not ready to go there. They don't have the will for it because they're living in too many excuses rather than living in the potential. So yeah, I think there's a big difference between ambition and purpose. I definitely spent the first 8 years of my 15 years of coaching. The first 8 years was about building the status, building the credibility, getting on the stages, getting in all the things and launching the podcast and getting millions of downloads, all the things, which is great. And there's a byproduct of impact that gets created. But what happened beyond that after the ambition was purpose. And purpose was where I started to approach my goals and my vision in a deeper way. I started looking at how does this affect my relationship, my family? What's the legacy here? Where am I going with this? If I invited God into my vision process for the next 10 years, what does that look like? What's he calling me to? How much more can I contribute, whether it's financially or my time, without expecting that it has to be, millions of dollars every year, whatever it may be? Then like, what is that, right? What does that look like? So it's sort of like a maturity to your success. You can still have the things, but they're no longer the priority that fills your cup and makes you feel like you've achieved something. It's more like the deeper, impactful things. And, when I was younger, I used to go out, used to drink, go to the club. I took drugs, all those things. I had to get it out of my system to realize that that's not the greatest quality of life. I'd rather hang out with family or friends and have an awesome dinner and great deep conversations at the dinner table. That's what purpose started to feel like, compared to going to the party and like wasting my night away.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of people are still in ambition and they might call it purpose, but I truly believe that what pulls us out of ambition faster to a deeper, more impactful meaning and mission is when we call upon God to be a part of our day to day and where we're headed. And that's when we start to have the depth and the connection with what we're truly here for.
All right. So let's take that purpose. Let's focus on purpose. So everybody, we're looking for that. Everybody listening to this show, including me, we continue to try to refine our lives and our understanding and our knowledge and our insight, be self-aware and drive towards that. So here we are. Then a lot of people, we find that purpose. We find that direction we want to go. And yet we wonder why we aren't making progress. And to one of your primary focal points is procrastination. So I went to Mind Strong Academy and I took the procrastination because it's always been of interest to me, Joel, because I'll look at my own life and even look at the great things. So here I am. I feel like I'm pursuing my purpose. I'm excited about something. Let's go to writing the book. Okay. So I wrote my book a few years ago. And I'm excited about it. I got a book deal, with one of the top publishers. I'm writing a book. It's something I care about. My kids were actually the impetus for writing it. I like writing. There's nothing negative here. It's all positive. And yet it took me so long to sit down and actually do it. And I would just laugh at myself and what is wrong? What is this that gets in the way? Well, it's still hard work for one. It's still going down the rabbit hole and having to focus, which is not one of my strong suits. But now to procrastination. And it was interesting to watch myself. And I do that today. Well, you've made that a main focus. And I know it's one of the top, it's gotten really popular. And I wonder if it's because of the age that we're in, there are more distraction opportunities than ever. If that feeds into it. So let me start there. Because you literally have a quiz. You can go take it. We'll talk about it here in a second. Take a quiz and find out your procrastination, style in essence. But what brought you to that? With all the things that you could focus on as a coach, that's one that you've made a primary focal point.
Yeah. So if you're listening right now, you can go to doquiz.com. It's nice and easy. Do quiz, DOQ.
That's where I went and took the quiz. Yeah.
Yeah. So go there and take the quiz. It takes like a quick 3 minutes. Don't procrastinate.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, right? Because sometimes people think that procrastination is laziness, and that's so not true. There's something deeper going on in your subconscious, right? People think that procrastination tends to be a time management issue. That's only a very small part of it. Procrastination is actually an emotional management challenge, right? I personally struggled with this perfectionist pattern that kept showing up for me. So I had a lot of interest in working on my own patterns first. And so as I explored my character traits, my behaviors, I was able to put it into a category called the obsessive idealist. High achiever, type A personality, all or nothing type of personality, tends to wait for the adrenaline rush to kick in, can be very judgmental of myself and sometimes of others too, and project that judgment because I have these huge sometimes unrealistic expectations on how things should be. I get impatient a lot. So I wanted to work on that, knowing I wasn't fully 100% going to remove all of that, because there are positive things about the obsessive idealist traits too, right? Great double down focus, high energy, great enthusiasm, and all that. I don't want to take that away from my trait expression, but it was just learning how to manage it better. So as I was exploring my own traits, I also found fragments of other traits that weren't necessarily as strong or, prominent in me. So I put them to the side. And after a while, I started realizing, wait a minute, there's other categories here. And as I was coaching more and more people, I went, oh, I think that you're like mostly this and this. And I started piecing it together. And I got to a point where I created the 6 different categories for the 6 different types. And they're all distinct, different from each other. We can all express some elements of each, but we have a dominant one that we lean into, which is the primary procrastination type or pattern. And yeah, it's been a huge revelation and insight for so many people. I've had more than 7,000 people go through it. We're probably even approaching maybe even 8,000 to 9,000 people now. We've started an ad campaign. We've got a lot of people jumping in. It's been amazing just to get feedback and see like how many people have come to realize how much it's actually impacting their life. It touches everything. So yeah, I know what you're saying when you talk about the book. There can be a few different reasons why it happens, but one of the things I noticed with, and by the way, did you get the obsessive idealist?
Yes.
As a result?
I was going to say, so again, and this will be in the intro, but go to doquiz.com. I went there, I took it. Yeah, it was super quick. And I got the obsessive. I'm looking at the page right now. I pulled it up, the obsessive idealist. And, so folks to know, so and it was free. There was a couple minute video from you about it. And then it got, does any of this sound like you? And I read through it and go, well, yeah, it does. And, we went through the procrastination types, and it's significant. I think any of these, it's like going through, again, we talked about, you and I met through Thais Gibson and doing her attachment style quiz. And it's significant for it to come out and go, yeah, I totally resonate with that. Okay. Now, well, awareness is huge, just to know, gosh, yeah, I do. I'm not weird. I'm not so strange. I'm like a lot of other people. And now how can I gain more health in this so that I am doing, well, like you said from the beginning of the show, I'm doing it from a more centered place, and I'm not letting this stuff control me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like getting back on the horse, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people, if we were to use this analogy, it's like a wild horse that's running around in a paddock, and that's your brain. It's the way your mind is thinking. It's like jumping all over the place. You're getting distracted. It feels out of control, and fear comes up. So it runs. Fight or flight kicks in, freeze or fawn kicks in. So we want to just take hold of it, right? It's getting on the horse and holding the reins. That's what we're doing when we learn about our procrastination type. So you have the obsessive idealist, you have the dreadhead, you have the stargazer, you have the radical defiant, you have the diversion junkie, and you have the angry altruist. They're the 6 types, right? So what I found, Kevin, was there is this, in psychology, we refer to it as the avoidance compensation syndrome. And it's where you will go to start a project or a task or set out to achieve a goal, and then you distract yourself and go off and do a bunch of other things. And this is very common for a lot of people, no matter what your type is. It's more of a general trait expression. And the reason why we do this is because if I can trick myself into thinking I'm making progress by doing the small things that I'm competent at, then I'll get a short-term sense of fulfillment going, oh, I achieved this. This is great. Knowing I still put off the most important thing, right? In your case, it's like writing the book. So you distract yourself, oh, I'll do another podcast episode, or hey, I'll get this cover thing designed, or I'll jump on the phone call and have a chat with my friend. And at the end of it, it's like, oh, I did all these things. But the question is, but did you do the thing that is the most fruitful, that has the greatest impact, that is maybe even the highest income generating activity? And a lot of the time it's no. And I know that it's something that I get to be mindful of as well. No matter how much I've worked with the procrastination patterns and supported so many people to transform that, we all have these tendencies to be distracted because we don't want to sit in the uncomfortableness for a little bit of sitting down and starting the book or finishing the project feels like pulling teeth. We also put off completely finishing a project because if we finish it and we put it out and it doesn't meet our expectations in how it's
Yeah.
received, so aka if the book doesn't sell or the marketing campaign feels really uncomfortable and painful and long, then we tell ourselves that means that it's failed. And we'd rather put it off and not do it at all than to experience a failure or a mistake because we make it mean that, see, I told you, you're not good enough.
Hmm.
Right? So it's good to be mindful of these patterns and do it anyway. It's like, hey, that's coming up. That's interesting. I sort of laugh sometimes at the process of like, that's interesting that came up for me today. And sometimes it's as simple as sitting down and just writing down a to-do list and having it prioritized with numbers next to it. Number
Yeah.
one is the most important one that requires the most willpower, which probably would require for you to put your phone on airplane mode and put it in a cupboard and shut the door and lock the door and put the keys in another room in
Yeah.
order for you to get that thing done, right? Whatever it is. So, yeah, these are really important things to think about, creating buffers so that you're not going into these habitual patterns of distracting yourself, making sure that you create time blocks, making sure that you are also setting your body and your mind up with the most beneficial state that it could be in. Maybe it's having a coffee in the morning because that's what gets you fired up. Maybe it's journaling first so you can get all the other stuff out the way and clear the clutter and then sit down with clarity. Or maybe it's going for a walk first so you get your blood going and circulation and get your mind focused on your project with endorphins and let yourself clearly think before you start the project. We all have different methods and ways to anchor ourselves into a better state and better posture to be able to focus on that 1 hour, 2 hour time block.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Joel, because it is so tempting for everyone, I think me included, to have, the next person on the show like you, to read the next book and to hear how somebody has figured out success for themselves. We recently had Robin Sharma back on the show for his new, actually, I don't think
Robin's
we've even
awesome.
published it yet, but
Yeah.
his new book. But I had him on years ago, a couple years for his book, The 5 a.m. Club, about getting up at 5. He has
Yeah.
this routine, go 20 minutes of exercise and do this and do that. And we hear that a lot, have your creative time in the morning, which does work for me. Yet, as you just said, looking at the different methods, if I just get up, brush my teeth, have my water, whatever, and then try to go into creative mode without checking, because you hear that, like, don't get on your devices, don't do anything at first. If I don't, it just kind of nags me. So I actually do, especially with 9 kids. I want to make sure everybody's alive, and kind of go through the details and kind of get rid of my anxiety list, and then I'm ready. So that's what works for me. So I do look at my stuff to see, is there anything that I better address that's going to come back and bite me in the butt later on. Now it's got to have a timeline. And if I let that then get me into, now I'm just on dealing with email and whatever, and I never get to my creative time, that doesn't work. But what is it that works for you? I've got a brother who gets his best creative time after about 8 p.m. at night, and he may go till 1. At 8 p.m., I'm ready to go to bed. So completely different. But man, as long as he gets his creative time, kudos to him. So I appreciate you leading us to find the thing that works for you. Don't necessarily get caught up in somebody else's perfect routine that may not work to you for them. Fair?
Yeah. Yeah. And in the Mind Strong Academy, if you were to take the quiz and you decide to jump in, there's a 7-day free trial. So you got nothing to lose. You can jump in there. It's $47 a month, which is just pennies. Like it's cheap
Yeah.
compared to, what else is out there. And this answers your questions directly, right? I have workshops with 5 to 10 minute little modules where you're learning from me. I'm teaching on the whiteboard and breaking it down and showing you how to structure based off your actual procrastination types so that you're
Yeah.
able to make that change and have the transformation. So it's all there. I think a lot of the time people are, like you said, trying to apply general based things, but what if what you need gets to be customized
Yeah.
so that you're addressing the actual trait challenges that you're having rather than just doing this general thing going, I do this religiously and it doesn't even work. This it happens so often. People tell me I do this breath work or I do this and that. It's like, yeah, these things are beneficial, but ultimately your brain needs this type of roping in and structure in order for you to be able to produce. What works for an obsessive idealist doesn't necessarily work for a dreadhead. What works for dreadhead doesn't necessarily work for an angry altruist. There are certain things that get to be attended to in order for you to be able to optimize and upgrade your brain and expand and actually get into action and get into momentum again. And I've dedicated the last 9 years of my life being an expert I am the expert in the procrastination field for this. So, like, save yourself the time, the money, and the energy and just go do it. Jump in and learn how to get a hold of it. Even if you jumped in and learned 5 of those quick modules, that's in total, you got 7 to 10 minute videos each. What's that? It's like 35 minutes to 50 minutes of like watch time. You don't have to do it all in one sitting. You can do it one each day. And now you have a game plan on how you can approach it. We have a 31-day planner in there too that's developed just for your type, where you can go through the exercises in that each day to be able to, get into action. So, 20% of what we're doing in this world when it comes to business and trying to level up is mechanics. It's the strategy, right? What do I get to do? What's the strategy? How do I go about this? What do I prioritize? 80% of it is your emotion.
Yeah.
So if you can work out how to be able to best get on the horse and hold the reins and manage your emotions, you become a very powerful person in this world.
I've got a quote I want to run by you. I'm looking for it here as we talk. I'll see if I can find it. But let me start first by asking, you talk about the 6 different types of procrastination styles. If you took a random sampling down, New York City of everybody and just took random people and had them take the test, there'd be certain percentages. Now we've got a skewed audience, again, of aspiring people, the kind that would show up and listen to, an hour or two of personal development. So amongst those, do you find those people are generally going to, is it across the board? It's still just kind of, no, man, it's just kind of an equal, they're going to fall into all 6 categories equally. Or do they tend to be, these kind of people, aspiring people who listen to the show are going to generally be 1 or 2 different types is going to be the majority. Just like you asking me, oh, Kevin, so are you the obsessive idealist? Yeah, I actually am. You nailed me on there.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I love it. Yeah, we got all the statistics on that. I've had close to 10,000 people go through it, so we can see all the numbers. The most common one is the obsessive idealist. Now,
wait, in general or amongst this type of audience?
No, in general,
okay,
is obsessive idealist, because anyone that tends to want to improve their life a lot more, they do tend to be someone that values growth and achievement. So there's a higher chance that you're going to fall closer into the obsessive idealist category by default. But the secondary one is the dreadhead. And the dreadhead, they tend to turtle in and pull back when they get out of the comfort zone. They have negative thinking spirals. They have a big fear of failure, making mistakes. We do live in a culture where, there are people where they have experienced quite a bit of trauma. I come across it all the time in my coaching. And so they live in the fear of rejection, the fear of being judged, and so that can play out and affect you putting yourself out there. If I put myself out there and I get criticized or judged, that means I'm not good enough, right?
Yeah.
So that plays out as a second top one, and then the third one is actually the stargazer, and the stargazer, they tend to be very big on vision. They're very good at writing down goals and coming up with ideas and incredible concepts. They live a lot in the conceptual.
Yeah.
They idealize things quite well, but they're not living in a well-grounded strategy a lot of the time. Anyone I've worked with that are stargazers, they actually really thrive when they have someone that can hold them accountable and they have structure. They do really well with structure because that's the missing piece. So they're good with their visions, but they need the integration piece, right? They need the mechanics and the technical.
Interesting.
But the reason why a stargazer is third is because they love to learn. Okay, so they read a lot, they investigate and love to learn things for new ideas. And that's a beautiful trait. There's positive things for all of the traits.
Yeah.
But what we want to do is just manage the aspects that are going to make your life tougher if you don't pay attention to it. So that way you can level up and thrive. I'm proud to be an obsessive idealist type. I think it's a great superpower to have. It's just managing it well. Everyone has their great powers. You got to learn how to direct it. It's like Peter Parker in Spider-Man when he first starts shooting all the webs everywhere and everything's out of control. Or Superman when he's shooting lasers out of his eyes. He doesn't know how to control it. Once he gets a control of it, it can become a great, tool, a great way to serve. So that's what we want to do with the procrastination types, is get it to more people so more people can understand themselves well, because self-awareness will allow for you to have more growth in your life, and you can upgrade everything across the board. You upgrade your mind, you're going to upgrade your life.
Okay, let me ask you this, because it's before even meeting you, Joel. It's something that's been on my mind for a couple months, and I read it. Honestly, I think it was out of a Tim Ferriss email, and he quoted this guy, or no, he had a guy on a show. I can't remember, but I don't think the focus was procrastination. Actually, no, the focus was addiction. The focus was addiction. I wish I could give him credit. I can't come up with the guy's name and didn't find it in my quick search here. But he was questioning some aspects of what we give credit to. Yeah, we're procrastinating. And I'm going to paraphrase. He says, are you procrastinating or are you giving into an addiction in essence? Meaning he doesn't say that, Bob went and he's procrastinating. He got drunk. We don't say he was procrastinating. He was given into an addiction. And I look now, even with my kids, some of my kids, and go, are you procrastinating on your homework or whatever? Or is it because you're giving into, call it an addiction if that's too strong, but you're giving into that desire to go scroll social media, or giving into that addiction. I mean, I can do that and I'm going on and gosh, is Kevin procrastinating? Or is he giving into his addiction to go ride his bike even more, or run, or do some physical activity? And I hadn't thought about it that way. And now I'm looking at my own and going, okay, am I procrastinating? Am I putting it off? Or am I giving into addiction? Such a strong word, but you get the idea. I'm giving into another desire.
Yeah. I love this because, and there's a few elements to this, right? We're all addicted to something. Right? Let's be real.
I agree. Yeah.
You can be addicted to working out at the gym. You can be addicted to porn, which isn't a very helpful addiction to have, because it can be very distracting and affects your self-esteem and affects your marriage or relationship. You can be addicted to success. That was the name of my company. As an obsessive idealist, high achiever, type A personality, that was my philosophy for life: is be addicted to success, go for it. And I had John Assaraf on my show. He's into neuroscience and transformation. He's like, man, I love that, addicted to success. He goes, we're all addicted through our dopamine hits to something. You'd rather be addicted to achievement. It's when things come out of balance, right? So you can have your focus and your disciplines on the things that can be positive, but if you're overcompensating again, that's not a good. That's when it becomes the unhealthy addiction, right? Now, procrastination can be bucketed from time to time as distraction or addiction to something. The reason why somebody gets up and goes to the fridge and eats the cake when they know that they're overweight and they need to curb their eating habits is because when they eat the cake, it gives them an emotional feeling, a chemical change, whether it's a dopamine hit or some sort of these like feel-good endorphins, which gives them a form of certainty, but it's temporary. And there's usually a shame and a regret that happens on the back end of it. That's when we say, okay, that's an addiction. That's unhealthy. So, my addiction at one point was like eating Lindt chocolate. I used to go and eat dark Lindt chocolate. I had this story. I said, when I eat chocolate, it stimulates me. I get a good energy from it. It's my thing. It's not as bad as having 5 cups of coffee, but it still became a thing where after a while I was like, you know what? I'm putting a lot of sugar in my system at this point, and I'm starting to rely on it. I'm starting to tell myself a story that I need it to have energy, which isn't true, right? So it's when we become dependent on something in order to reach an emotional state. I say that the way to be able to change that, to transform it, is we've got to look at what we identify with. It's the same thing with a smoker. If a smoker says, I am a smoker, they're not kicking that habit, because they've identified with it. They're fused with it as that's part of their identity. So good luck, right? Whereas if someone says, I smoke, then they're already breaking it away as like, that's an action or a habit that I do. but there's a willingness or an openness to changing that, right? And that's where we get to start is like, hey, are you a smoker or do you smoke,
Right.
right? uh, my ex-wife, she cheated, she had an affair, and later on she just says, I'm a terrible person, all this stuff. We broke up, we divorced and everything, but like she said, she's like, she was in relationship patterns of people that were abusive, and I said, you don't deserve that. And she said, well, I'm a cheater. And I said, have you done it again since? And she said, no. And I said, so you're not a cheater, you cheated. There's a
Yes.
difference,
Yes.
right? So yeah, it's really interesting how we label ourselves, what we identify with can have a hold of us. You said that word, it was really interesting. You said giving in. Giving into what? Giving in assumes that you've given yourself over to something else, which isn't your authentic self of who you want to be or you desire to be.
Hmm.
So I look at that. I look at like, okay, who do you truly desire to be that's in your potential? And then what are you doing in your behaviors and your habits? If that it's not congruent with who you desire to be, we get to change it.
Okay, you brought up something else. We had Patrick Lencioni on the show. I think we're about to have him back on too, but he's got the Working Genius, again, another profile type thing. And you go in and take it. I think it used to be $25. You go in and it kind of shows you, where are you inspired with your work? Like I love an idea and a blank sheet of paper, man. Let's bring it to life. That's called Wonder, WONDR. Wonder is that. So he has like 6 different styles. One of them, that is my least is tenacity, finishing. I love the blank
Okay.
piece of paper, get a framework, then I'm done. So looking at that, and he's saying, okay, as much as you can, work over here. However, when it comes to procrastination, I don't know if you call it an addictiveness, but I am so much more prone, other than finishing the book or launching the new high dollar opportunity that I might have. I'm going to gravitate. If I don't watch out, I'm going to gravitate over to I got a new idea. I just want to play with that.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, everybody's over here and go, oh my God, can you launch the thing? Can we finish this other project so we can actually make a buck or whatever?
Yeah.
And so again, it's not you call it an addiction. It's not, I'm not going and getting drunk or looking at porn. I'm, working on a new idea. It sounds great, but you have not done this important thing over here. And that's where I have to look at, again, by being aware of where I'm procrastinating, kind of maybe even looking at the good, great thing in the moment, not overall. Fair?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you either hire or acquire management
Yeah.
support, right? And the hire is you almost finish the thing, and then you have somebody that like helps you to finish off the end part and puts it out and does the rest of the journey for you.
Yeah.
So that's hiring someone. Acquiring is you acquire the understanding, the skill set, the practice to be the person that finishes that thing. If you can see that translating and being beneficial in many different fields of your life, it's better to acquire it. It's better to learn your procrastination patterns and how to manage it so that you can achieve more and finish things more and complete it and carry it on in all other areas of your life. I truly believe that there are some things you just want to hire people for. It's like, that's
Agreed.
not going to really be beneficial if I have to finish absolutely everything and carry every torch. There could be other people that could carry it better than you. So yeah, sit down, take an audit, have a look and see, do I hire or acquire the management support for this? If it's an acquire thing, then cool, get to know yourself well through the procrastination quiz. Learn how to be able to structure it better, practice it. Everything's a practice. Abundance is a practice, prosperity is a practice, creation is a practice, just as much as scarcity is a practice and lack is a practice and all those things, right? Fear can be a practice too. So we want to put our energy and our focus into things that are going to be productive.
All right. The other topic I wanted to hit on while we're here together is coaching. I know that that's a primary focus for you. You've got influentialcoach.com and that is what, so for context here, it will be, when this show comes out sometime in the previous couple months or so, I did a show with Tom Ziegler and he talked about AI in regards to where it's bringing us culturally and in the marketplace. That back in the day, we were kind of in the muscle culture of agriculture and do whatever. And we moved to the knowledge age. We all know that. Well, now we've got AI that's going to knock out a lot of the need for us to have knowledge, because we can turn to AI and get it in a minute. And his premise and feeling is, we're going, research, I should say, is that we are now going to he called it the heart and wisdom age. and it's the age of
Yeah.
needing guides of coaches. Okay, I can use AI, I can get all the knowledge, I can take advantage of that, I can have it write this and come up with this and utilize it for here. But what we need then, as we're sitting here overwhelmed, most of us, is we need coaches and guides. You just talked about hiring people. I find myself doing that. It feels like there's somebody I could hire every day because anything I'm interested in, there's too much to deal with. I do not have the bandwidth to go become an expert in it enough to even know what decision to make. So I'm just going to hire
Yeah.
somebody. I'm going to hire somebody to do social media. I'm going to hire somebody to figure out my, health and wellness and my diet. I'm going to hire a business coach, not even just a business coach, but a business coach for this specific area of business, yada, yada, yada. So here you are with, coaches and teaching them. And I'll come at it to you this way, Joel. My experiences are so many people that have good guidance that they can offer. If they are sitting
Yeah.
down in front of the right person, they can help guide them. And they know that they can, and they'd love to because they've been impacted by a coach. But they don't know what to do. They don't know how to go out there in this overwhelmed marketplace. And how am I going to go make a dent? Am I going to, I got to spend $100,000 on
Yeah.
social media stuff so I can go get 100,000 people on Instagram like Joel, or more, you get more than that, but to do that, and they're overwhelmed. So give me your insight, your thoughts on the need for coaches right now. I guess maybe the need, the opportunity, and then the guidance.
Yeah, I love this. So you're right. We've come from an information era. There's an overload of it. It's on a trajectory that's ramping even higher. It's like a hockey stick, right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
how much we're advancing with technology and information. And so it can become very overwhelming. And I believe that integration is going to be the most important key. It's like, okay, you got all this information. What do we do with it, right? How do we integrate it? How do we make this thing work now? And that's the business I've been in for 15 years in coaching, is how to integrate, right? You can read all the books, but if you haven't utilized it and implemented it, what does it mean, right? So we have that. I also believe we're shifting into a spiritual age. You can see it already. Like the amount of people that are coming to Christ now, like Russell Brand and these big celebrities and actors, all these people like starting to announce that they're having this experience and they're coming back to a relationship with God. It's beautiful to see. And I think people are realizing that when you reach the sort of pinnacles in information, reach the pinnacles in the industrial age, reach the pinnacles in the things that the world can offer, you realize there's still a void in your heart that gets to be filled. So yeah, it's an interesting time we're moving into. No one's been here before. It's very interesting to see how it's unfolding. I think that right now what we're seeing in the coaching space is there are a lot of people calling themselves coaches, but they're not actually coaches. They are motivational speakers, which
Yeah,
is great, right? They're learning information and sharing information, but some of them are adding to the noise. They're not necessarily bringing something new to the table because they're parroting information from like books they've read, but they're not actually sitting down and like really looking at like how did I experience this and how could I turn this into something tangible that's unique from my experience to teach for others to implement as well, right? And we know nothing is new under the sun, but you
yeah,
know the difference when you hear this, the person says the same old Albert Einstein quote for the thousandth time, or when someone's actually spoken from a real visceral experience. There's a lot of
fair.
value in that, right? So there's that, and then there's also a lot of people that are content creators that call themselves coaches, but they're not necessarily coaches. Coaching is different. Coaching is sitting down and hearing the things that are said behind the things that are said. They're navigating feelings, emotions. They're understanding how the subconscious works. It's about challenging people's perspective, shifting the stories and rewriting the narrative that is playing on repeat in people's minds. You can't tell people what to think, but you can teach them how to think differently. That's what a coach does. So I think a lot of people are very confused as to like what is a coach, or am I
That's
a coach,
great.
or who's a
Yeah,
coach. So I think once you realize that coaching is an art and a craft, it's actually a craft in itself. And the true people that are really committed to the craft, their names will ring bells in decades to come, and people will be going to them. Like Tony is a true coach, Tony Robbins, right? He's been able to weather the storms and live it out. Like I've learned how to properly coach, where I can stand on stage in front of hundreds or thousands of people and have someone share with me that they were raped, or they had physical abuse, or they're addicted to porn, or whatever it may be. And I can stand with them in that moment and support them to navigate through the trials and tribulations of the emotional turbulence that's within them, to bring them back into that centeredness. And that's a skill that people can learn. It can't just be parroted from a book that you've read. You've got to be able to understand it and be on many different mats working with different personalities and dynamic types. And it's such an awesome craft. Like, I love it with all my heart, and I love it. I wouldn't want to do anything else. So you've got to love it to want to take it to that level. It's not like, I'm going to be a content creator for a bit, or I want people to look at me speaking on stage. You will not last in the industry if that's your intention. It's just not going to work like that. Those things are cool and they get to be a part of it, but it's not everything. And so there's a great responsibility in being a coach. You can't take anybody to a place that you haven't been within yourself, right? So you've got to learn to lead yourself first. Like, I had to go through the breakthroughs. I did all the exercises and the tools and the frameworks. I don't teach my coaches anything I haven't done already within myself and integrated. And so there are people that will go to like one event and they're like, I'm a coach now. And they'll share, write down your goals and say affirmations. This is like lightweight, elementary 1, 2, 3 stuff. You got to learn the craft of it, right? You got to go, okay, how do I understand the subconscious mind? How do we repattern these patterns? How do we understand the childhood blueprint? And what is shadow work? And how do we work on a cellular level with what's happening here? How do we understand the nervous system and how it responds through thought patterns? All of these things are really powerful, man. And if you can learn that and you're excited about it, you're going to do absolutely well as a coach, because you'll know how to get results. And if no one knows how to get results, then they're not a coach. You've got to learn how to sit with people and navigate with them. No one has the perfect formula to be the absolute perfect coach that gets 100% every single time. But with my tools, my methodologies, my frameworks, I've battle tested it in front of tens of thousands of people on stages, workshops, retreats. That's what I teach my coaches. And they can learn from scratch, from the ground up, how to build their certainty, how to build their influence. They have PDF documents printed out with all the tools and frameworks so they can learn it rapidly and walk people through it. And then they learn how to craft their message, know their niche, create an undeniable offer, how to get leads, how to create content, and how to enroll clients. Like, that's the full kit and caboodle to turn this into a career and step into your higher calling.
I want to ask on that on one piece, because we could talk about all the aspects. Again, folks, go to influentialcoach.com to see all the details, because we're not going to cover, we're not going to do it justice here. But that aspect right there, knowing your niche, is the one that I find myself coming back to time and time again with. I mean, I'm not necessarily coaching coaches as a career, but I just am in contact and union with so many coaches. And I'll so often find myself going, God, to the essence, what is your niche? If I set you on a stage, what can I pick on? Let's pick on a fitness coach. Okay. You have wisdom in health, wellness, fitness, whatever it is. So I'm going to set you on the coach. Let's make it even more specific. You're a woman and you have great wisdom to offer, great guidance to offer. So I'm going to set you on stage with 9 other women who all, in essence, they've got similar understandings as you do. They can help people in similar ways. I've got to figure out what it is about you, what's unique about you, so that I would know when I'm talking to somebody in need over here who's, it's another woman, they're talking about health and wellness and fitness, and I need some help. I need to know which one to send them to. Because you can't all of them say, oh, we can help everybody. I can't, you're all good. I want to know who to send to who. Who specifically are you for? That's what I end up looking at and go, you've got to be able to answer me, so that when somebody talks about it, I go, oh, you need to go meet with X because she's going to speak your language or hit your specific niche. So speak to that, at least that one part I want to hit, because it comes up so often.
Yeah, it's a good question. I learned this from a guy called Alan Weiss in a book called $1 Million Consulting, which is a really cool book. So I must give him credit and respect.
Great.
He basically just breaks down the different layers or levels of what a coach or consultant is and how they could label themselves to stand apart, right? So generally you have coach, right? Let's just say coach or consultant. They're two different things, but similar fields, right?
Yeah.
coach will sit down, navigate emotions, feelings, introspective stuff, reflective, plus the tools and frameworks. A consultant is more the person that comes in to support with strategy and accountability and all that, right? So he'll say coach, consultant. Underneath that, as we go to the net, or above that, as you go to the next layer, you have an expert. An expert is somebody that has an expertise amongst a whole bunch of other people that has an expertise, right? So maybe your niche is you are a trauma-informed coach. So, okay, cool. So we've got a bunch of trauma-informed coaches. There's quite a lot of them out there now. It's becoming more popular. I was like, okay, cool. So that person's an expert in that specific field. Then you have the expert, which is the golden point. It's the expert is the person that is dominating in the space amongst the experts, that has been able to differentiate themselves enough to specialize in a certain field to say like, hey, I've got this system or this methodology or this way that I do it that's different from everybody else. And it doesn't have to be extremely different. My friend Sally Hogshead, she's a top female marketer. She says it's easier to be different than it is to be better.
Yes.
You're not trying to be the absolute best, because then you're having to compete with your Tony Robbins.
And nobody will believe it in this day and age to say, oh, I'm the best. Nobody believes it. But to say I'm different, I have a unique way in this capacity. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can position yourself as the expert if you specialize in a certain system and way that's different, and you've got to be able to show the results. Otherwise, you're a snake oil salesman. You got to say, hey, here's my system that is different. I'm the expert in this way of doing it in this field, and here's 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 testimonials that have come from it. All right, fair enough. You get to have that. People call you on the podcast to speak about that. Like, I'm the expert when it comes to procrastination.
Yeah.
I've dedicated 9 years to it. I've worked with over 10,000, close to 10,000 people with it. Like, I get to have that title, right? And so many testimonials. We're talking like hundreds and hundreds of them, right? So I'm the expert with that. The next level on top of the expert is the thought leader. Okay, so the thought leader is like the one that gets called when there's like there's something going on in culture or society. It's like, oh, we need this person to speak into it. They call you on a TV show or a radio show to speak about it. You get offered book deals to speak, to write it specifically about that, because you're the go-to person. That's the thought leader. And then on top of that is the ultimate, which is the icon, right? The icon is, it's your Elon Musk's. It's Tony Robbins is at the point where he's iconic in personal development. Warren Buffett is iconic in investing, right?
Yeah.
There's levels to this, and you have to work out where's my level. And if you're at the moment coach, consultant, or maybe you're just starting and you're not quite sure yet, you don't have to have all your ducks in a row and it has to be perfect. Just sit down and think about it and be like, hey, what would I do? What sort of system would I create? And what sort of tools, frameworks, exercises would I start learning? What would make me slightly different? Doesn't have to be extremely different, but slightly different, so I can differentiate myself and work myself up to the credibility of the experts sooner than later.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to be required from you now as AI amplifiers and people just start duplicating and copycatting stuff. You've got to be able to do the things that stands you apart, and you've got to be able to get results. I think it's a great filtering system. It's going to weed out a lot of people that just think that fake it to make it is the motto, and that's not how you should be showing up. You got to put in your work and earn your stripes.
Well, and I appreciate you even looking at that. And we all have, gosh, we can back up and say, gosh, we all want to have influence. We want to share a message. We want to help somebody in a way that we have found help. But you even saying that, yeah, but what is that? Is that coaching? Is it consulting? A little bit different. Is it your content creator, which, is a different thing. It may not be hands-on with somebody, even that, looking at it and helping. Okay. Well, again, check out I'll have this in the intro later and stuff, but influentialcoach.com for that. Now, we talked about procrastination. That's again, doquiz.com. Anywhere else, Joel, that you would have people connect with you other than those two spots, or should they just go there?
No, brother, I really appreciate you sharing those links and informing people about a way that they can level up their life. So thank you. If you've wanted to become a coach, or maybe you are a coach, but you feel like you've hit a snag point, you really want to level up and scale, then go to influentialcoach.com. And everyone should at least do the procrastination quiz and find out more about yourself. That's going to be a big advantage for you to understand yourself more. Why not? You got nothing to lose in either one, right? So thank you for that. And you can check out the Addicted to Success podcast as well. Addicted, the number 2 success podcast. We've been around for almost 15 years now. It's insane. I created a website called addictedtosuccess.com almost 15 years ago. We've reached 367 million views on that website over the years. It's like,
it's amazing.
It's a titan in the space. Yeah, it's amazing. It did way better than I ever thought it would. I mapped it out on my vision to hit 100 million people, and we hit that within the first like 4 years to 5 years. So yeah, it's pretty insane stuff. So thank you for having me on, man. Thank you for allowing me to share my wisdom with your audience. And I jump on a lot of podcasts. You're such a great host. You ask great questions. You're super present. And I'm sure anyone that is listening really felt pulled in and a part of this conversation too. So thank you.
Thank you, Joel, man. It's a gift. I am always the most grateful recipient, I think, on these shows. So thanks. I'm jazzed to connect with you and look forward to doing more together. Thanks, Joel.
Yeah, you're on my podcast too. So anyone that's listening that wants to hear Kevin on my podcast, jump on over.
All right. Thanks, Joel. All right, friends. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Again, Joel Brown. Really encourage you to go check out your procrastination type free quick quiz at D as in dog, O quiz.com, doquiz.com. And right now, whatever you're listening to your podcast, whatever platform, you can find him at Addicted to Success. The number 2, Addicted to Success. Huge podcast. And of course, you can find the Addicted to Success website online where a zillion other people are checking it out as well. Folks, until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and most of all, enjoy the ride. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I look forward to meeting you in the Drive Tribe community for ongoing discussions about each episode. You can subscribe to the Drive Drop newsletter for weekly updates. Find it all at kevinmiller.co, along with all our social media and video clips. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and enjoy the ride.